I never thought I'd come to know the hospital cafeteria better than my own kitchen. But after 3 straight weeks of living between waiting rooms and Jake's bedside, the cold tiles, humming vending machines, and stale coffee felt like home. That morning, the fluorescent lights felt especially harsh. My eyes burned from another sleepless night spent holding Jake's hand, listening to the steady rhythm of machines keeping him stable. I needed just a few minutes away, a break from the beeping monitors and the quiet fear building in my chest. I walked into the cafeteria with heavy legs and an even heavier heart. I didn't care about food. I just wanted something hot in my hands. Something normal. Coffee. That was it. The line was short. 2 people ahead of me. I tried to stay upright, wrapping my cardigan tighter around me like it could keep out the ache that had settled deep in my bones. That's when I heard them. 2 nurses sat at a small table just a few feet from the coffee counter. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried, hushed but excited, like they were sharing a juicy secret. And then I heard it. I swear, he looked exactly like the guy in room 218, one of them whispered. Room 218. That was Jake's room. My ears perked up, heart thudding. The other nurse laughed softly. Right? If he had a beard and maybe 10 fewer pounds, I would have thought it was him. Creeped me out for a second. I blinked. The first nurse continued. He was at the rural outreach clinic near Fairhaven. Same pale skin, same gray-blue eyes, and that same serious look, like he's always deep in thought. My fingers gripped the paper coffee cup a little too tight. I turned slowly, pretending to search for sugar packets, but really I was trying to get a look at them without being obvious. They were young, maybe in their late 20s, still in scrubs. One had a messy bun. The other tapped her pen against a clipboard as she talked. They weren't being cruel. They weren't gossiping with bad intent. It just sounded like 2 coworkers connecting dots. But those dots shook something loose in me. Could have been his twin, one of them added, casually sipping her drink. Twin. The word hit me in the chest. Jake didn't have any siblings. At least, not that he knew of. He'd grown up in foster care. No photos of family, no real history, just scattered case files and a lifetime of unanswered questions. Every time I'd asked about his past, he'd smile softly and say, "You're my family now. That's all that matters." I stood frozen with my coffee, my pulse buzzing in my ears. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just coincidence. Someone out there who just happened to resemble my husband. But something about the way those nurses talked, the timing, the eerie similarity. I didn't even remember walking out of the cafeteria. All I knew was that I ended up in the hallway, holding onto the coffee cup like it might steady me. I couldn't explain it. I just knew something had shifted. The first time Jake fainted, we laughed it off. It happened in the workshop. He was sanding a table leg, and the next thing I knew, he was slumped against the wall, dazed and pale. I panicked, but he brushed it off with a weak smile. "Probably just skipped breakfast," he said. But it happened again. And again. Then came the bruises. Big, ugly ones across his arms and legs. He couldn't explain them. Neither could I. He wasn't the kind to complain, but I could see it in his face. The fatigue, the effort it took to stand upright, the tremble in his fingers when he thought I wasn't looking. Something was wrong. We went from the local clinic to specialists, then to the hospital. Blood tests, bone marrow biopsies, scans. Each step chipped away at the hope I was clinging to. Jake stayed calm, quiet, trying to make jokes. But I saw the fear behind his smile. We both knew this wasn't something a few pills could fix. Then Dr. Patel sat us down. Her voice was calm and steady, the way people speak when they're about to break your heart, but they don't want to shatter you all at once. I remember the way she folded her hands on the table and said the words I still can't forget. "Jake has severe aplastic anemia." I didn't know what it meant at the time. I just nodded slowly, waiting for her to explain. And when she did, It felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Jake's bone marrow wasn't working. It wasn't producing enough red cells, white cells, or platelets. His immune system was failing. The bruises, the fainting, the fatigue, all signs of his body giving up on itself. The disease was rare, serious, life-threatening. I gripped Jake's hand as the doctor talked about treatment options: blood transfusions, immunosuppressants, antibiotics. But then came the part that made my stomach drop. The best chance for long-term survival was a bone marrow transplant. But donors needed to be a close genetic match, usually a sibling. Dr. Patel looked at Jake kindly. "Do you have any brothers or sisters we can contact?" Jake shook his head. "None that I know of." He tried to smile, but I could see the flicker of something else in his eyes. That familiar ache, the one that came up whenever people asked about his past. Jake never knew his real parents. He was placed in the foster system as a baby, bounced from home to home, and eventually aged out without any real answers. He used to joke about it, call himself a mystery man. But now, in that sterile white room, there was no humor in it. No family meant no donor match. And no donor match meant... I couldn't finish the thought. We spent the next few days in a fog of tests and consultations. I watched as Jake grew thinner, paler, weaker. He still tried to protect me, said things like, "Don't worry, we'll figure something out, and I'm not going anywhere." But I could feel it. The clock was ticking, and I didn't know how to stop it. I started researching everything: online forums, medical journals, support groups. I spent nights hunched over my phone in the hospital chair, while Jake slept beside me, his breath shallow, his skin nearly translucent under the fluorescent lights. There were donor registries, of course, people who signed up to help strangers. But matches were rare, especially without a known family line. Every nurse, every doctor, every well-meaning friend said the same thing: "It's going to be hard. You need to prepare yourself." But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I wasn't ready to give up. Not on Jake, not on our story, not when I still had even a sliver of hope. I told myself I'd fight for him, however long it took, even if the world said it was hopeless, even if it broke me, because Jake wasn't just my husband. He was my home. There's a certain kind of silence that lives in hospitals, not the peaceful kind and the heavy, aching kind, the kind that makes your heart race even when no one's speaking. I came to know that silence too well. Jake was fading, slowly, quietly. He used to be so full of life, always working on something, always humming while sanding wood in the garage, always smiling with sawdust in his hair. But now, he barely had the strength to lift a spoon. His voice, once strong and steady, came out in whispers. He slept more than he was awake. His skin had turned grayish. I could see every bone in his face. And no matter how much I tried to stay hopeful, the truth stared me in the face every time I looked at him. He was slipping away. People started saying things. Friends who used to visit weekly now just sent texts. Some said I was being unrealistic. Others gently told me to start preparing for the worst. One even told me, "Maybe it's time to let go, Sarah. You can't save him." But they didn't know Jake. They didn't know the man who made me believe in love again, who built our dining table with his bare hands, who rubbed my back every night when I had migraines. He wasn't just my husband, he was the best part of my life, and I wasn't going to sit by and watch that light go out without doing everything I could to keep it burning. Still, I was tired. So tired. The kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. It was the tired that lived in my bones. A mix of fear, helplessness, and heartbreak. One night, after Jake had finally fallen asleep, I stepped out into the hallway. I told the nurse I just needed a break, maybe a cup of coffee. She gave me a gentle nod and a sympathetic smile. I think she knew I was holding on by a thread. I made my way to the cafeteria, walking slowly like every step took effort. My body moved on autopilot, but my mind was far away. All I could think about was the last thing Jake had said to me before falling asleep. I'm sorry I can't be strong for you anymore. I hated that he felt that way. He didn't need to be strong. I just needed him to stay. The cafeteria was mostly empty, just a few night shift staff grabbing food before their rounds. I stood in line, barely noticing the menu. I was too numb to feel hunger anyway. All I wanted was something warm to hold on to. And then I heard it. 2 nurses were sitting at a table near the back, chatting between bites of a late dinner. Their voices were low, but one of them said a name I recognized immediately. Jake Thompson. I froze. Room 218, the other nurse replied. Yeah. You know, he reminds me so much of that guy we saw last month at the Fairhaven Outreach Clinic. Exactly, the first nurse said. Same build, same kind of eyes. A little healthier looking, maybe, but the resemblance was wild. I kept staring at him like, have I seen you before? The other nurse chuckled. I thought the same thing. Could have been his twin. I couldn't breathe. I turned, trying not to seem obvious, pretending to grab sugar packets from the counter. But my ears were burning, my mind raced. Twin? No. Jake didn't have one. He didn't have any family. But they weren't joking. Their tone was sincere, curious, even a little unsettled, like they really had seen someone out there who looked exactly like my husband. I don't know why it hit me so hard. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was how close we were to losing everything. Maybe it was instinct. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I left the cafeteria with a coffee I didn't drink and a heart pounding with questions I couldn't explain. I didn't have answers yet, but I knew I couldn't ignore what I'd just heard. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jake's face. And then I saw the face of the man those nurses had described. It was haunting me. Not just because he might look like Jake, but because of what that could mean. All my life, I've never believed in coincidences. And after what I heard in the cafeteria, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was waiting to be found. So, the next morning I went home, showered, changed into fresh clothes, and kissed Jake gently on the forehead. He was still asleep. I whispered, I'll be back soon. I promise. Then I drove. The nurses had mentioned the Fairhaven Outreach Clinic, a small community health center in a rural town about 40 minutes from the hospital. I had never been there before, but my hands seemed to know the way. Every turn of the wheel felt driven by something bigger than logic. When I arrived, the clinic was quiet. A bell chimed softly as I stepped inside. The front desk was staffed by an older woman with kind eyes and a soft voice. I told her my name and asked carefully if she remembered a man who had come in a few weeks ago. Tall, light-skinned, gray-blue eyes, serious demeanor. I described Jake, but without saying who he was. She paused, then nodded slowly. Yes, she said. That sounds like Ben Riley. My breath caught. Do you know where I can find him? She hesitated for a second, then scribbled an address onto a sticky note. He lives just outside of town. Doesn't talk much. Keeps to himself. I thanked her and left, holding that note like it was made of gold. The road to Ben's house was lined with pine trees and small wooden fences. Quiet. Peaceful. His cabin sat at the end of a gravel driveway, simple, sturdy, surrounded by old tools and stacked firewood. The kind of place that felt lived in. Honest. I got out of the car slowly, my heart pounding. I didn't know what I was going to say. How do you walk up to a stranger's home and ask if he might be your dying husband's brother? The front door opened before I could knock. He stood there, tall and still, a little confused, and I froze, because the resemblance was undeniable. The same sharp jawline, the same storm gray eyes, the same quiet seriousness. If Jake had grown up in the woods instead of foster homes, this is what he would have looked like. We stared at each other for a moment. Then I said, Hi. I know this is going to sound strange, but I think you might be related to my husband. His eyes narrowed, cautious but curious. Excuse me? My name's Sarah Thompson, I said. My husband, Jake, is in the city hospital. He's very sick. He grew up in foster care. No family. But I overheard two nurses talking about someone from Fairhaven who looked just like him. That someone, I think, might be you. He didn't speak, just looked at me with an unreadable expression. I stepped forward a little. I'm not asking for anything. I just need to know if you've ever wondered where you came from, if you ever felt like a piece of your life was missing. He folded his arms. I was adopted as a baby. I don't know much about it. That was all I needed to hear. I don't mean to intrude, I said, voice shaking, but if you'd be willing, maybe we could take a DNA test, just to see. He looked past me, out toward the trees. Then he nodded once. Okay. Just like that. No big speech, no drama. Just a quiet man opening the door to a question that could change everything. In that moment, I didn't know where this would lead. I didn't know what we'd find. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was walking toward something, not away from it. Ben wasn't much of a talker, but there was something about the way he carried himself, steady, calm, deliberate, that told me I could trust him. And for someone I'd only just met, that meant everything. After he agreed to take the DNA test, I expected hesitation, maybe second thoughts. But he didn't stall. He asked where to go, when to be there, and showed up, right on time. He didn't ask for details, didn't demand proof. He just showed up. The clinic took care of the testing. A simple cheek swab. Quick, painless, clinical. But the waiting? That part was brutal. I went back to the hospital, back to Jake, and tried to keep my emotions in check. I didn't tell Jake anything. Not yet. He was too weak, and I didn't want to give him hope unless there was something solid behind it. He'd been let down too many times in life. Abandoned as a baby, bounced around from home to home, never chosen, never claimed. I wasn't about to give him another maybe. Ben, meanwhile, stayed in touch. Short texts, always polite. Any news? Let me know when you hear. I'll be around. A few days later, I got the call from the clinic. I stepped out of Jake's hospital room, heart pounding as I answered. The woman on the other end had a calm voice. Too calm. Hi, Mrs. Thompson. We have the results from the sibling DNA test between Jake and Mr. Riley. I held my breath. There's a 49.8% match in shared DNA. That indicates a high probability of a half-sibling relationship. I froze. Half-brothers. Jake had a brother. I leaned against the hallway wall and closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. It wasn't just a resemblance, it wasn't coincidence. It was real. Jake had a brother, and I had found him. I called Ben right away. He answered on the first ring. They said you and Jake are half-brothers, I said, trying not to cry. He was silent for a few seconds. Then quietly, huh. That was it. Just a soft, huh. Like something in his life had just clicked into place. Jake's still really sick, I added, voice trembling. The best chance he has is a bone marrow transplant. We were told a sibling match is his strongest hope. Would you be willing to get tested? Ben didn't hesitate. Just tell me where to go. The hospital arranged it. Dr. Patel, who had remained cautiously optimistic through it all, seemed stunned when I told her Jake might actually have a brother, and that he was willing to help. Ben came in the next morning for his HLA typing. He was quiet, respectful, a little awkward in the hospital environment, but completely focused. He didn't even flinch during the blood draw, just rolled up his sleeve and said, "Let's get this done." I watched him from across the room and wondered how two people who'd never met could look so much alike. Not just in their features, but in the way they moved, the way they listened before they spoke, the way they carried a kind of quiet strength on their shoulders. He hadn't asked for any of this. He didn't owe us anything. And yet here he was, standing in a sterile hospital lab, offering a part of himself to a man he hadn't even met. After the test, we sat in the small visitor's lounge. "I don't remember much about being adopted," Ben said softly. "But I always had this feeling, like there was someone else out there. I didn't know who or why, just someone." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Jake always felt like he was alone in the world. Ben looked down at his hands. Maybe he's not. We waited 2 more days for the compatibility results. I didn't know how to pray properly, but I did. Every hour, every breath. When the call came, I nearly dropped the phone. Ben was a match. Not just a close one, a strong, viable match. Dr. Patel's voice was clearer than ever. There was real hope now. I texted Ben the news. He replied in seconds. "When do we start?" Just like that. No drama, no big emotions, just steady, silent courage. The kind that saves lives without asking. The day of the transplant came faster than I expected. One moment, we were waiting for the compatibility test results. And the next, hospital staff were handing me paperwork, walking me through risks, timelines, and procedures I couldn't fully process. Everything moved quickly, like a wave I couldn't stop. But in the middle of it all, I just kept thinking, we have a chance now. Ben arrived early that morning, just after sunrise. He wore a plain jacket and old boots, like he was heading out to chop firewood. No drama, no fuss. Just quiet determination on his face. Jake hadn't met him yet. We'd agreed to wait until after the procedure. Dr. Patel thought it was best to focus on the medical side first. Emotions could come later. I sat beside Jake's bed while nurses prepped the room. He looked exhausted, too weak to speak for long, but when I held his hand, he managed a small smile. "You look tired," he whispered. I laughed under my breath, brushing his hair from his forehead. "You should see yourself." He smirked faintly. "Still handsome?" I nodded, trying not to cry. Always. There was a strange calm in those final hours before the surgery. Maybe it was the exhaustion finally settling into my bones, or maybe it was the quiet that comes when you've done everything you possibly can. There was nothing left to chase. No more waiting for a miracle. It was here. Ben sat with me in the waiting area as they wheeled Jake into pre-op. He didn't say much, just handed me a bottle of water and looked down at the floor. I realized then how hard this must have been for him, too. He didn't know Jake. He hadn't grown up with him. But somehow they shared blood. And now Ben was about to share bone marrow, the very thing that could save his life. "You okay?" I asked him softly. He gave a quiet nod. "Yeah, just a lot to take in." "I know." There was a pause. Then he said, "It feels like something I was supposed to do. Like, it was always leading to this." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was too tight. I just reached over and squeezed his hand. The surgical team called us shortly after. Ben was needed in one room, Jake in another. I watched them both disappear through opposite doors, wondering if they felt the same fear I did. Alone in the hallway, I sat with my head in my hands and whispered a prayer. I didn't use fancy words. I just begged, "Please let them both come through this. Please let this work. Please don't take him from me." Time slowed down after that. I must have walked the same hallway 50 times, checked the same clock over and over, drank half a dozen cups of coffee I couldn't taste. Every time the elevator doors opened or a nurse walked by, my heart jumped. Hours passed. I paced. I sat. I stood up again. I cried quietly in the stairwell where no one could see me. Then finally, the door opened. Dr. Patel walked in, her scrubs wrinkled, her eyes tired. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me, and in that moment, my whole world paused. Dr. Patel didn't speak at first. She just looked at me and smiled, a small, tired smile, but one that told me everything I needed to know. "The procedure went well," she finally said, her voice gentle. "Both of them are stable. Jake responded better than we expected. He's not out of the woods yet, but this was a big step. My knees buckled. I didn't even realize I was crying until a nurse came over and gently guided me to a chair. Relief poured out of me like a flood. I couldn't hold it in anymore. All the fear, the tension, the sleepless nights. It all broke loose the second I knew he was going to live. He was going to live. Hours later, I was allowed into the recovery room. Jake was still groggy, drifting in and out of sleep, but his color was better. And for the first time in weeks, there was life in his face again. When I held his hand, he squeezed mine back weakly. No words, just that squeeze. And it was enough. Ben was recovering in a room across the hall. I stood outside his door for a long time before I knocked. When I entered, he looked up from the hospital bed, a little pale but very much awake. "He made it?" he asked immediately. I nodded, my eyes already welling up. "He did, because of you." Ben gave a soft exhale. "Good." There was a silence between us. Not awkward, just heavy with meaning. "I don't know how to thank you," I said, stepping closer. "You didn't have to do any of this, but you did. You saved him." He looked away, blinking fast. "I just did what felt right. I couldn't not do it." After a moment, he added, "Can I meet him?" The next day, I brought Ben into Jake's room. Jake was sitting up now, weak but awake. I helped him adjust his pillows and whispered, "There's someone I want you to meet." Ben stepped in. Jake's eyes searched the stranger's face for a moment, confused. Then I said softly, "Jake, this is Ben. He's your donor." I watched Jake's lips part, stunned. Ben gave a nervous wave. "Hey." For a second, no one said a word. Then Jake reached out, shakily, and Ben stepped forward to take his hand. "Thank you," Jake whispered, tears already in his eyes. Ben shook his head. "No, thank you, for giving me a chance to do something that mattered." I stepped back and watched them, these two men who had never met, connected by something deeper than friendship or even blood. They were tied together now by sacrifice, by grace, by life. And that's when I finally let myself cry. Not from fear or grief, but from gratitude. For second chances. For unlikely heroes. For the stranger who became our family. The man who saved my husband sat across from us. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt peace.